I know Barbara had a hard time with Leona's story in the end, but I think he was a little sad about that too.
Well, I'm still holding out for a Leona adventure sequel. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like working on the Emmanuel Point shipwreck?
We all have this very romantic vision of what underwater archaeology is, but it is very low visibility. There's always a fish right up in your face as you're excavating all the time, of course, because they want to know what's going on. It's a very amazing experience.
Welcome to Archaeology Books for Fun, digging books that aren't drier than dirt. I'm your host, Tristan Herenstein, and with me as always is my co-host, Barbara Clark.
Hello, everybody.
And last time, we read a book titled Luna the Cat, and we know and enjoy the company of both of the authors of this book, so we thought, let's have them on and talk about the archaeology in the book and what into it and everything. But before we get into that, here at Archaeology Books for Fun, we are sharing our enthusiasm for archaeology and the past, and you can help us reach more people by dropping a like, subscribe, and if you really want to make our day, a comment or a review. If you want to support us even more, you'll also find a donation link in the description. So here with us today, like I said, are both of the authors of Luna the Cat. First up, we've got Nicole Grenan. Nicole is an underwater archaeologist and my former counterpart in Pensacola. Currently, she is the assistant director of the University of West Florida Archaeology Institute. Hey, Nicole.
Hi, Tristan. Hi, Barbara.
And also with us today is Mike Toman, historian and museum director for the Destination Archaeology Museum for the Florida Public Archaeology Network. Hey, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, so like I said, we read your book and we really enjoyed it, even though we're not the target audience, but it was really fun. And I know that like if I was at that age, I would have adored a book like this. So we wanted to talk to you about what went into the book. And I guess first question I have for you is, I don't believe either of you've quite done a product like this before. Can you tell us kind of how it started?
Go ahead, Mike.
Do you want me to go?
Okay, yeah, I think
Yes.
it's frozen.
No, I'm just sometimes I'm frozen, just not right
Ah.
now. Yeah, so the book really started, like you said, it's something that we really had not done before in terms of like this format, this children's chapter book. Obviously, over the many different years that Nicole and I have been doing programming, for the general public in public archaeology, we've done a lot of kids programs as part of that. But really what inspired it was just that, our experience working with younger audiences in public archaeology, and there being what we perceived as there being really a kind of lack of children's chapter books for this age range, which we really targeted audience was really for 8 to 12 years old. So you're talking about upper elementary to middle grades. But after doing lots of kids programming, and one in particular was one that's called Archaeology Storytime, where we use kind of the library format of the Storytime program where you read a kid a story or chapter book. We had been doing that program for quite a while, and we just noticed that there just wasn't really any great, there are some really good books, but that we were able to utilize for that program, but not necessarily always focused on archaeology. So we saw a gap in that, and we decided, let's give it a shot. And we thought it would be nice to kind of try to engage kids. We knew that kids love animals, and so we thought, what can we do in terms of engaging that age range with an animal and have it focused on the archaeology. And so this is kind of where the idea was born, that we would take animal remains found at an archaeological site and then base a story around that particular animal, but draw in the actual history and archaeology of that time period and of that cultural group in that wherever those remains were found.
So I'm understanding that you found Leona's remains at the archaeological site?
Well, we didn't find it, but yes, on one of the shipwrecks, at the Emmanuel Point 2 shipwrecks, the archaeologists working there did uncover the remains of a cat. And so that's really what spawned this, is when we learned about that, we thought, man, what a great way to kind of bring in the actual history and archaeology by using this animal as the main protagonist in the story. This has been done before. There's a well-known book that I believe the Mary Rose put out about a dog called Hatch. Mary Rose was a British vessel that sank in I believe, the 15 or 1600s. But they actually uncovered the remains of a dog on that, and so there was a little like children's kind of book, a picture book written about that, but it wasn't really focused so much on storytelling. It was more about just a little bit about the dog and what they found. But it really wasn't in the same sort of format that we've chosen to write, which is really focused on more the story than the process of archaeology,
Hmm.
because I think that's an important part, especially to engage like younger audiences, is to tell that story versus just here's a couple things they found.
Cool.
Well, it's
Yeah.
kind of
Go
sorry.
ahead, Nicole.
I was gonna say it's kind of a important question you asked too, because this was a conversation that Mike and I had when, we started this project was, okay, we have these archaeological remains of a cat, but how do we deal with the fact in the book, if it's targeted for a younger audience, that eventually the cat loses its life, during the wrecking event of the shipwreck. And so that's how we ended up creating two cats in the story. One
Hmm.
who, of course, is our protagonist, and then the one who represents the archaeological remains, which is Leona.
Well, I'm still holding out for a Leona adventure sequel. So
Who knows? Maybe she survived.
there was probably more than two cats.
Yeah, yeah, I would think so. Yeah, and the thing is, like, having animals on these sailing vessels was actually very common. Cats were often on ships because they controlled the rat population. That's one way and I'm sure for companionship too. But yeah, I'm sure there was more than one cat on each vessel, and there were 12 ships, so it's a lot of cats.
One question that occurred to me was there's a lot of archaeology around these sites or this site, depending on how you break it up, I suppose. And I was very impressed with the epilogue at the end, which kind of detailed some of the archaeology. But I was wondering if you considered or had ever considered maybe a companion novel to go along with this, detailing a bit more, because it felt like there's a lot to talk about, basically. And I don't know if that's something on the record or not, just something that occurred to me. I could go with it.
Yeah, I think Mike hit on this a little bit, but the goal with this particular book was not so much to focus on the archaeology and the history as it was to create a good story, to create something that would create, a hook for kids to get more interested in what happened in 1559, when the Spanish and other settlers came to this area to establish a new colony for Spain. I think we included the epilogue, of course, because we want to do the archaeology justice. It would be interesting, maybe one of the things that we did when we first wrote the book before we really got published or anything was we did guided programs that went chapter by chapter. Or I think it was a couple chapters by a couple chapters that really broke down, you have the story, but then it broke down all of the, I guess you could call them Easter eggs that are in the story that allude to historical documents or the archaeological record that we have. So that was one of the interesting things, or one of the interesting ways that we could break down the story a little bit for the younger audience without, losing the fascination of the story, but also providing some education about history and archaeology. And one of the things that Mike has done recently too was create some companion lesson plans for this as well. So it's not quite, a sequel to the book, but it's something that enhances learning, chapter by chapter or section by section to focus on, how do we know this about the past and what can we discover about the past using these clues?
So, do I understand right that you guys, before it was published, you were using these chapters in kids' programs?
Yeah. So when we wrote the book during the pandemic, right? When everybody was they were leaving the office, but we still, of course, as people who do public archaeology, still had to try and find ways to do public archaeology creatively without being able to interact with the public. And so this was something that Mike and I had talked about for a while, and Mike felt really strongly about, creating something that would fill this need that we had seen. And, writing the book during the pandemic was one thing, but also how can we engage with the intended audience a little bit to get it out there and to do the teaching that was supposed to go along with the book as well.
Interesting. So, did you kind of create the chapters as you went through it, or did you have that all pretty well finished up before you started engaging with audiences?
We wrote the book as a whole,
Hmm.
and then I think we did Zoom programs during the pandemic. So we advertised through, social media or wherever to get people to read the chapters ahead of time and then join us for this digital story time so that we could delve a little bit more into what's actually happening and what the archaeology is of that specific chapter or set of chapters that we were focusing on.
Interesting. Okay. And how was it received when you did with the kids?
I
What was
think
your observations on that?
I don't know, Mike, if you want to jump in here at any point, feel free to. I don't mean to dominate this part, but the programs were pretty well received. I think, we didn't have huge numbers because everyone at that point was doing Zoom programming. And I think there's a lot of Zoom burnout happening especially early on in the pandemic. But I think, we had 6 to 8 kids, a few families joining us for each of those, and they would always really participate in the program. So we felt really good about the product that we'd put out there.
Awesome.
Yeah, I feel just to kind of tack onto that again. It was early on when a lot of that programming was pretty widespread. So, but yeah, the response we got was, I thought, really positive from that age group, but also the parents and some other adults who had been educators in their careers. They responded really well to it. And since we finally got it published this year, that kind of coincide with them finally. The cat remains were discovered several years ago, but it was sometimes it takes several years for academic publications to actually get out there. And so there was an article that came out, I think, in April of this year, 2025, that detailed that discovery of not only this cat on this particular shipwreck, but also just the domestic cats being brought over into what's now North America, kind of more broadly in general. And so that's when we thought it was a good opportunity to release this, finally get this published and get it out there to kind of coincide with that. And the response has been like overwhelmingly positive since we've done that. I mean, just the other day, we got a text from a friend of ours whose neighbor kid just read the book, and it seems like it really had an impact on him. As she said that he didn't want to stop reading it. He wanted to continue all the way through. And as I know, Barbara had a hard time with Leona's story in the end, but I think he was a little sad about that too. But I've had other parents reach out to me. One parent said that it's the first chapter book that their fifth grader had ever read, cover to cover, by himself. So
Yeah.
so we getting little comments like that. It's got pretty good reviews on Amazon. We've had other people kind of reach out, and you never know, right? When you put something out there, your friends and family, of course, are always going to be your probably friendliest critics. But we're getting to the point now where we're having strangers literally reach out and say, "Yeah, this was a good book and had an impact." And I think that's a testament to our focus really being on what was the most important about this was that it was at its core a good story. And the model that we use it was not a new model. It's actually been around since the beginning of storytelling, and that's the hero's journey structure. That's what ancient Babylonians used to tell the story of Gilgamesh. It's what J.K. Rowling used to tell the story of Harry Potter. It's the exact same story structure. And so we utilize that here. And the real challenge for that, though, was to make sure that the story that we're telling of Luna, this fictional cat that talks in our story, but was based in all accurate history and archaeology. So that the timeline that's happening in the book, the things that the colonists and the people are experiencing from being in a storm, right? I mean, and some of that's drawn from personal experience. Like I've been through hurricanes. I mean, we've all have. We've been through hurricanes. I mean, I used to live in Okinawa when a typhoon would hit, having that being in the eye of the storm, like that was me at 9 years old. Like I experienced that for myself. But like those real kind of human experiences that we all can relate to today are some of the same things that happened to people, hundreds of years ago or even thousands of years ago. But at its the very root, we wanted to make sure that whatever we created, that it would be an engaging story. And so far, I think that has panned out. But we'll see. You never know. I'm waiting for that bad review. You're like, what's the bad review?
That's when you know you've made it, when you get the bad one,
Right, yeah.
a bad review. So
When the
then you're
haters come
good.
out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, actually, your comment on the hurricane and basing it off of experience, like we read Artifacts as well, and we read that and this, and we're like, yep, they know what it's like to be in a hurricane. I think you can tell when someone's experienced it. I wanted to share, you guys were talking about some actually positive feedback. I've got a story that you haven't heard yet. Just last weekend, this is good, don't worry. Just last weekend, we were at a local conference and we had your book on the table and telling people about it. And a family came by and were very interested in it. And the next day they came by and the dad was looking at it and says, I think I saw that on my Amazon list.
Oh, wow.
So it had already been purchased that very day.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So they were very excited about it and very keen on it, and I'm sure they'll enjoy it. So
Well, awesome. Yeah, that's
yeah.
great to hear. Well, hopefully they do. And so far, like I said, it's all been very positive. I mean, yeah, that's great to hear.
Yeah. And so so our audience, of course, is not just of that age group. I think our audience is mostly adults. And so I actually would like to hear you guys talk a bit about what you understand about or what you have done with the archaeological sites, the Tristan da Luna archaeological sites specifically. So starting with, I guess, maybe the terrestrial sites site that was found. It's been a few years now, but how have you guys engaged with it? Because I know you've done at least some on the sides and photographs. I've seen some of Mike's photographs of it.
Well,
Yeah.
Nicole's really active in it. Yes, yeah. I
Okay.
was going to say
Yes,
you should
and
answer
you
this.
are Nicole. You are kind of running this now, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not running it. I'm not the PI, but I have
Okay.
to manage it, I guess. But well, I might go chronologically if that's okay.
Sure.
Just I'll give a brief rundown of the archaeology and then describe our experience a little bit. But there had always kind of been this local lore in Pensacola that this area was the site of Tristan da Luna's 1559 settlement. But for many years, there had been no archaeological remains found that were associated with it. And it was in 1992 when the Florida State underwater archaeologist Roger Smith decided to undertake a Florida shipwreck survey. And essentially that survey was going to, start in Pensacola, wind its way around the state, all the way up to Jacksonville area to try and take stock of the archaeological resources that were in Florida state waters. And, that survey made it to about Pensacola Bay before it found something really significant. And so they were doing a remote sensing survey. They were using side scan sonars, magnetometers, and they got a really big hit on their magnetometer. They sent divers into the water and they discovered the fluke of an anchor sticking out above the sediment in Pensacola Bay in only about 13 feet of water. And so, as the story goes, upon further investigation, it turned out that that was the first shipwreck that they found associated with the 1559 Luna settlement. And we know that there were a fleet of ships and several of them wrecked in the bay, but none had really been found up until that point. The state was really cautious at first about saying, this is it, because you don't always, you don't want to be that person that says, we found it, and then turns out it's something else. So they call that ship the Emmanuel Point 1 shipwreck because they didn't want to call it, Luna 1. But eventually they decided that based on the artifacts, the material culture, all signs pointed to a 16th century shipwreck. And so the state of Florida, the University of West Florida got involved with archaeological excavations on that one, but continued the search because we knew that there were multiple shipwrecks in Pensacola Bay as a result of this hurricane that afflicted the Luna settlement. And so in 2006, another shipwreck was discovered. And then in 2015, we got our first indication of the Luna settlement on land. And so a local individual who had taken classes at UWF in archaeology noticed some ceramics on the surface and reported those finds. And upon further investigation, they were also 16th century Spanish material. And so, the university began shovel testing in the location of that Luna settlement site. And sure enough, there was a huge amount of 16th century material. And so the university has been working on that terrestrial site for years. And then in 2016, a third shipwreck, Emmanuel Point 3, was discovered. So as of right now, there are really 4 individual components of kind of the greater settlement attempt from 1559. Working at the University of West Florida, it's hard not to be familiar with that history, but it feels special to me because I cut my teeth as an undergrad, or not as an undergrad, as a graduate student on the Emmanuel Point 2 shipwreck. So I came into the program, did my scientific diving credentials. And then that whole first summer that I was in the field was on Emmanuel Point 2, excavating that shipwreck, being able to be up close and personal with a 16th century shipwreck was a pretty special thing. So the story has always kind of held a special place in my heart. And then eventually working at UWF, with Mike and my other colleagues at the Florida Public Archaeology Network, we would do, I don't know, Mike, dozens of programs on Luna archaeology with kids, with adults, with civic organizations, you name it. We were doing it all the time. So it's very personal, it's very special, and it's a really unique set of sites that we have here in Pensacola related to the settlement attempt.
Yeah, I said last episode, Pensacola is the first place I've lived where I didn't have to explain my name because everybody's familiar with it. Everywhere else, I have to really explain, no, it's with a T, and I have to go through all that rigmarole.
There's going to be a Hotel Tristan.
Yeah, oh, is there?
I just saw driving down this road. I
Then
was
it's
like,
mine,
what is
I
this
think.
building? That should be yours. That's where you should stay next time you
Yeah.
come visit. You could be like, this is my hotel.
VIP.
Yeah. So Nicole, we haven't really dove into underwater archaeology. I know that's a classic pun. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like working on the Emmanuel Point shipwrecks? What was involved? What was the experience of that?
Yes. Well, I think like any young student who's getting into underwater archaeology in Florida, you're picturing crystal blue waters and shipwreck. Like we all have this very romantic vision of what underwater archaeology is. And I think, I tried to temper my expectations all the time anyways, but working on these sites is a really unique experience. So I mentioned that they're only in about 13 feet of water, give or take, and they're in Pensacola Bay and near the outflow of several major rivers in the area. So, we think about crystal waters, and mostly that is down in the Florida Keys, where we're working on these sites up here in the Northern Gulf in Pensacola Bay, near these rivers. We're lucky if we have 6 inches of visibility while we're down there excavating. And so it's kind of a trial by fire as an underwater archaeologist. It's very much, I hate to use another pun, but like sink or swim while you're out there doing this thing. You either do really well and you adapt quickly to working in those low visibility environments. You have to turn off all of those external things in your brain that says danger while you're diving because you don't know what's right next to you. But once you can kind of do that and you get familiar with the site and you get used to the way that things work, it's really not bad and it's quite fun and engaging. And now being in a position where I get to help facilitate other students to get that experience, it's really kind of a cool thing to come for full circle with a project like this. But it is very low visibility. It's warm water during the summer, cold water during the winter. There's always a fish right up in your face as you're excavating all the time, of course, because they want to know what's going on. And yeah, it's a very amazing experience.
Cool. Okay, so we're getting close to time. I have one question before I want to take a moment and kind of hear what you all have coming up. But one thing, actually thinking about the book, a question I had was, did you know that the names you chose for your cats were so close to my cats
That
when
was
you chose those
total.
names?
Had no idea. That when I listened to your episode and so I heard the episode and I thought, wow, man, what a coincidence. Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, so I'll be expecting royalties.
Well, they're not very much, so don't expect much. I mean, one thing we've learned is that you do not make a lot of money publishing books, but I wasn't the point anyway, so that's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
We'll send you a check.
A blank,
Yeah,
a zero,
right.
000.
000.
Yep.
Cat food.
Yeah, a can, yes. All right, so you both are actively working in your fields. I'd like to take a moment and give you opportunity to talk about what you've got coming up and talk about anything you would like to promote in particular. Mike, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Well, yeah, I mean, here at the Coordinating Center, we do a lot of exhibits and programs. We've got actually a brand new exhibit that's going to open actually this Saturday, which will be October 11th, about prohibition on Palafox Street. So looking at the archaeology of speakeasies, which is really interesting. We've got, there are basic kind of bread and butter programs always coming up, but I think one big thing, at least related to this book, is this book is part of a whole series that we started. It's called Tales from the Trowel. And so this is just book one. So the next book is actually already written. It'll be about a donkey that archaeologists in St. Augustine actually uncovered on Anastasia Island. And based on the time period in which the donkey was determined to have lived, we know that it actually was one of the animals that helped to quarry coquina blocks that eventually built what's now the Castillo San Marcos. So that book will be coming out sometime next year, either in the spring or summer of next year, and it will be called Diego the Donkey. So again, using archaeology and history to tell the story of what happened. But of course, we had to throw a bone, to use another pun, to our friends in St. Augustine, and actually co-wrote that with a colleague who's a City of St. Augustine archaeologist, Catherine Sims. But also for this book, we kind of hit the ground running. We've got a bunch of events scheduled, book signings coming up. The best way for people to find that information, they can follow us on our socials. So Tales from the Trowel, either on Facebook or Instagram. We also have a website. It's talesfromthetrowel.com. So people can find all the cool stuff that's happening, not only with this book, but also the next several that will be coming out in the next few years.
All right. And did you want to talk about or promote the Shipwreck Trail yet, Mike?
I mean, I guess we could. Yeah. Yeah. There's also the Museums in the Sea website. The state of Florida has shipwreck preserves that are all located throughout the state of Florida in the Gulf and the Atlantic. And so if people will go online and they go Museums in the Sea, they'll find information about those wrecks, but the brand new website will be launched in November. And so, all the same good information, but we'll have a lot better images, and just that website, I think, was created like 20 years ago. So, things have changed since then. So we'll have a brand new website that people can check out starting in November 2025.
And so if you want to check out some videos of dives on these places and learn about them, then that is the place to go. Nicole, did you have anything coming up that you want to share? You said you're getting ready for fieldwork here soon, right?
Yeah, well, if we're talking specifically Luna archaeology, there's kind of an exciting thing happening right now. The University of West Florida, the Archaeology Institute, and the UWF Historic Trust right now are partnering on a grant project that was initiated by Dr. Judy Bentz, who was founder of FPAN, former president of the University of West Florida, and founder of archaeology here in Pensacola, really. But she is nominating the suite of Luna archaeological sites to become a National Register of Historic Places district. And so she's working with someone who's done over 140, I think, National Register nominations to help write this. And it's going to include all 3 shipwrecks, as well as the Luna land settlement site. It'll be one of the first archaeological districts in our area, which is really exciting. And also one of the first to include both a terrestrial and an underwater component. So also really exciting. And so right now we're working with the landowners in the area where the Luna settlement site is located, but also with the underwater archaeologists here to come up with, a really great narrative that'll help create this archaeological district. So that'll be a really important designation that we have locally as a result of the continued research and archaeology efforts around the 1559 settlement.
Very awesome. That's actually really exciting.
It is very
Pensacola's been needing some more of that.
Yes.
So everyone, check out or keep an eye out for Diego the Donkey, and make sure you check out Tales from the Trowel, because they'll be doing more books that you can check out in the future. And so that covers our episode this time. For our next episode, Barbara and I are looking forward to starting a new book. We're going to start The Other Ancient Civilizations by Raven Todd Da Silva. So Raven Todd Da Silva, you may know her as someone who does videos on social media, so on YouTube and TikTok. And so you can check her out there under the handle Dig It with Raven. And so we're really looking forward to this. And until then, we'll see you all next time.
Happy reading, everybody.
Archaeology Books for Fun is brought to you by the Florida Public Archaeology Network, a program of the University of West Florida. You can find out more about archaeology and about FPAN at fpan.us. We appreciate any feedback, so if you're listening to us as a podcast, please leave us a review, and if you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Thanks for listening.